Happy New Year, true believers. So, it's been about a little over 2 months since the release of Marvel Spider-Man 2. And ever since then, we haven't gotten any news regarding DLC, New Game Plus, or any kind of new content updates in terms of an exact release date. We were told we're getting stuff in early 2024, but at the time of making this script and video, we haven't gotten anything yet. So, I've been thinking about ways for Insomniac games to add, change, and improve upon for Marvel Spider-Man 3. Now first, my heart goes out to Insomniac games. For the recent hacks that they suffered that caused a lot of personal information from employees, a roadmap of future games, and footage for their upcoming Wolverine game coming soon to be released. I will not be talking about these leaks, and I'm not going to talk about it until they're released by Insomniac themselves, and I want to apologize to Rocksteady Studios. If you saw it, I made a video talking about the plot leak for the Suicide Squad game. I was just overwhelmed by the negative emotions, and I fully take responsibility for my mistake. The video's down, it will never see the light of day again. I am sorry, and I won't talk about the game until it comes out. So, with all that out of the way, let's get started about talking about improvements and ideas for Marvel's Spider-Man 3. Let's talk about the improvements first before I go up with ideas. First thing isn't really about the game itself, but more about video game companies in general. Please stop giving us reveal trailers and then giving us nothing for years on end with nothing but vague details. For example, remember that Wonder Woman game that was announced like 2 years back? We still don't have any information on it other than concept art. And same with Insomniac's Wolverine game. It was revealed in September of 2021, and we don't have anything since then. And lastly, the Blade game that was just announced at the 2023 Game Awards, rumor has it it's not coming out until 2027. I understand that you want to get a product out as soon as possible, and you want to generate hype, but maybe wait a little later until you have more details to share, or even like gameplay, or at least a release window. No sooner than at most a year. A project can only be fueled by hype alone for so long until, people lose interest, until we get something new. Another thing for companies, especially making superhero projects, they need to properly credit the people who work for them, who made the stuff that they're taking inspiration from. Now, I know it's a whole legality thing. When you write for Marvel, Marvel then owns all of that. But still, just saying, hey, this story idea came from this person, or like in the Guardians of the Galaxy game that came out in 2021, all of the alternate suits have specific credits to where they first, came from. If the Amazing Spider-Man 2 movie tie-in game can do that, you can do it too. It's just if it wasn't for Donny Cates, you wouldn't have had the third act for Spider-Man 2 the way that it was. And the amount of times that MCU writers and directors completely dog on the source material for no reason, like they're trying to claim some kind of superiority high ground or think it's going to bring in more people, when all it really does is just alienate comic book fans, both casual and hardcore. It makes us feel like all this time we spent reading was for nothing. Another improvement that I think is needed is having New Game Plus and replayability available at launch. Now, I know game companies, they have so much stuff to take care of, so they don't have all the time in the world to do it. So just let them do it at their own pace. Give them the time. Now, I know they had New Game Plus for Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales, but that was a much shorter game compared to this one, or even their first game. I'm no game developer. I'm not saying, oh, it's super easy. It's not. But the problem with not having New Game Plus is when people 100% complete the main game, there's really nothing left to do. And I'll talk about that more in a little bit. Yes, we are given the ultimate difficulty, but we can only do that after beating the main story and entirely new playthroughs, which does add a little extra challenge starting from scratch with a higher difficulty, But, you know, it's also really fun to do it at the higher difficulty with all of your skills. Going back to the lack of post-game content, when you complete the game, there's really no replayability at all. All you can do is replay the Mysterio challenges, and you can only do that as Miles. You can't play the symbiote nests or the hunter bases all over again. So the map just looks and feels empty. Like, for comparison, here are screenshots from the 100% completed maps from the last two games, compared to this one. Like, notice how barren it looks? I mean, they also have, like, another, like, map to the side, but still. Hopefully with the upcoming updates, these worries will be dealt with. But all I'm asking for is just let us have that from the start if you can, so the game doesn't die out and have to wait a few months just to play it all over again. Another map improvement, or really just something they should bring back, is landmark icons. In the first game, the landmark icons served as a way to introduce people into this new version of New York City, and it was super easy to find iconic Marvel locations like Avengers Tower or Nelson and Murdoch. They weren't in Miles Morales, and they weren't in this game, so half the time I kind of felt lost and had to look for like the bigger buildings to remember where I was. It took me like 20 to 25 minutes to find the Sanctum Sanctorum to take this No Way Home inspired picture in photo mode. Again, it just makes the map feel empty. I don't even remember where Aunt May's house or Miles' apartment is, even though you're there multiple times in the story. It would even make sense as a story perspective for the Spider-Man to have these little indicators on the map, so they can, map out a proper path for like patrols and other stuff. Also, why aren't the super slingshots marked on the map? Like, if you don't use your mini-map when you're swinging, you'll almost never know where they are. I mean, besides seeing like the big flashing lights there and you're like, hey, there's a slingshot right here. Speaking of which, does that mean that the people of New York set those up for the Spider-Man? Like, did the people of New York have to pay extra taxes for that, or what? Like, they're not just like two poles set up. Like, there's a full-on like landing strip there. Like, you had... I'm thinking way too much into this. So, like, just... it would be nice to have the super slingshots added onto the mini-map as well. One last improvement that I can think of right now for Marvel Spider-Man 3 is this. Give us a longer story, or at least don't rush the third act. One of the main things that bugged me about Spider-Man 2 was how sudden the end of the game felt. The city is covered in symbiotes, like in Web of Shadows, but as soon as it's covered, you all meet up at May's house and it's the final mission already. If the third game really is the final chapter, and this is the last time we might be able to play as both Peter and Miles, the game's story is going to need a longer runtime. Spider-Man 2's story had a runtime about 15 hours if you were just playing through the story itself, same as the first game, but that was mainly due to cut content so they can make Deadline. I'm not going to fault Insomniac for that again. Again, because I mentioned that earlier. The game doesn't need to take literal days to complete if you're playing it non-stop. But again, this is the final chapter. Everyone should get their time to shine and have their stories and their character arcs fully fleshed out without feeling like some of them are being rushed or just put to the side. And this goes for every of the main characters, not just Peter, Miles, and Mary Jane, but Cindy and Albert Moon, Harry Osborn, Haley, Rio, Genki, Uncle Aaron, Norman, and Otto. So many other surrounding characters, they should have their time in the spotlight before, the story is over. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk about the ideas that I have. First, I want to talk about what I want to see from the characters and their arcs in this story. I don't have like a whole story planned out at the moment, but if you guys do want to see a video about that, be sure to let me know in the comments. In terms of the theme, it should be about dealing with change, accepting the responsibilities you have in your life, and moving on. Just about every character has gone through a massive change that has drastically affected their life in one way or another. And those same characters are still dealing with that, and it's holding them back. And they need to find a way to healthily move on from moments from their past so they can help with the things that are happening now. If that makes sense. In terms of how much time has passed from the end of the DLC, assuming the DLC takes place like a month or two after, like in the first game, let's jump a little over a year into the future and talk about the main Spider-Man, Miles Morales. Miles has taken the reins of being the main Spider-Man, and he's been handling as well as, anyone can in that position. He's just graduated from Broken Visions, and he's attending ESU with a scholarship in music, and he's living in an apartment with Genki in the city. Due to the symbiote crisis, though, Albert Moon was evicted from his home, so he and Cindy had to live in Rio's apartment, and now Cindy lives in Miles' room. Miles finds out about this, and he's, a little upset, but Rio moved his spider gear and other stuff in Uncle Aaron's apartment before they could find it. And in case he ever needs a place to stay, he can always go to Uncle Aaron. Miles dealing with change, moving on, revolves around him not fully coming to terms with the possibilities of having a new family. Having a new father figure, not fully being over the loss of his dad. And he eventually needs to learn how to move on and appreciate these new additions to his family, while not forgetting the ones he's lost and the lessons that they've taught him. This is later challenged when Cindy gets more and more involved with the plot of, the antagonists. Now Miles has to deal with this change in his personal life, affecting his life as Spider-Man as well. And taking responsibility is him more and more becoming New York's main Spider-Man. As Peter begins to, fade off, Miles fully takes on the responsibility of being New York's one and only Spider-Man. And going back to the whole thing with Cindy getting more involved in the plot of the villains, it helps create a bond and deeper understanding of these two-to-be Spider step-siblings. Having Miles live with Uncle Aaron on the side can also lead to a side mission where someone else has taken the mantle of the Prowler. It's up to Miles to find out who and what their motivation is. Maybe Miles is even scared to connect with the Moon family because he's worried they'll get hurt because of his life as Spider-Man. But as he works with Cindy, gets to know her more as the story progresses, Miles is able to accept these changes and fully heal and move on from his father's death and live his life, without forgetting his love and the lessons that he taught him. Now, let's talk about the other main Spider-Man, Peter Parker. Peter has been running the Emily May Foundation and their research to heal the world, but running a startup company in your garage doesn't exactly pay the bills as well as you would think. He has been working with Norman to help find a cure for Harry on the side, as Peter feels responsible for creating Venom and Harry falling into a coma. He even visits Harry once in a while to check in, even though he hasn't made any progress. Peter has really enjoyed taking a back seat and being Spider-Man. But one day during the main opening fight, Peter tries using anti-venom symbiote Surge, but it slows him down and it makes him weaker. We come to find out that the anti-venom suit has actually started to drain the radioactive cells in Peter's body, just like in the comics and the Spider-Man Edge of Time video game. So he has to give up this otherwise power boost, otherwise he may lose his spider powers for good. And his life with MJ is going well. They're more open with each other and what they're going through. They're just, they're happy together with where they are. But one day while they're going for a walk, MJ reveals that she's pregnant. Her and Peter are going to be parents. Peter is obviously conflicted with this. Does he raise their kid while continuing to be a superhero? How will being Spider-Man affect his life as a father? Will the baby develop spider powers of their own? What would Uncle Ben and Aunt May do? Or would it be better for the baby if Peter hung up his webs for good? Peter's progress in helping Norman create a cure for Harry is going along, but all Peter can come up with is a temporary treatment. It's not a cure. It's missing something. Norman secretly breaks Otto out of prison with the guise of redemption and combines Peter's creation with the G-Serum and tests it on himself, creating the Goblin. In the end, Peter is given the chance to live a normal life and makes the decision to live his life with Mary Jane and their baby. Peter dealing with change and moving on and responsibility is him finally letting go of Spider-Man and the guilt that was connected to it, knowing the city will be safe, and he can live a normal life and have the new great power and responsibility of being a father. Now here comes arguably the hardest character to write for this video, Cindy Moon. From the start, this version of Cindy Moon is nothing like her comic book counterpart. In the comics, Cindy was bitten by the same radioactive spider as Peter was, but she was eventually thrown and locked in a vault for like 10 years due to a prophecy where the inheritors would come and take her and two other spider people and destroy the Spider-Verse. Then she was released by Peter after he beat Morlun the Inheritor. Then she became the hero Silk to find her parents. She has organic webbing that comes out of her fingertips, not her wrists. Her story is very convoluted, and that's the most bare bones explanation I can come up with. Also, them being bitten by the same spider had them attract to each other through these pheromones, but thankfully that was slowly written off, and even the writers thought that wasn't a good idea. So Insomniac has the opportunity to pretty much create a new character from scratch. One of them is like not really having the pheromone thing, and the other is that it's more likely that she won't really have a connection to Peter. She'll more likely have a closer connection to Miles because she seems to be the same age as Miles. And when she eventually gets her powers, I don't think she'll get her powers during like the events of the game. It's similar to Miles in the first game, where she helps the Spider-Man take down the bad guys, but she gets her powers at the end. There would be a connection, somehow, but it's more empathy based rather than attraction. Like, they know what each other is feeling. Like, if Miles accidentally stubs his toe, Cindy would know, oh hey, he stubbed his toe and he's in pain. She doesn't feel the pain, she just knows he's in pain, even if she's in another room. This can be used to help them connect with each other more as their parents' relationship grows. For both Miles and Cindy, they can become more comfortable seeing each other as family through this game. While Cindy is dealing with a change and moving on in a similar sense of Miles, her mother and her brother went missing, and that leads to her reporter background trying to find out what happened to them, which gets them into the line of fire of the antagonists. And this whole reporter background from the comics could actually lead to a friendship between her and MJ. Speaking of Mary Jane Watson has been working on her podcast, The New Normal, to very positive reception. She's even been given opportunities to evolve her podcast into a full-on talk show. But it requires her to move upstate New York. Then, on top of that, she discovers that she's pregnant. Similar to Peter, how is she going to deal with this great change? And maybe we can get more insight into Mary Jane's life growing up and her connection to her parents. Because in the comics, it was not a good one. We could have something similar here where she has these doubts and thoughts that come with the stress of being a parent. What do I take from what I've learned, and what do I do differently? And how can she find a way to move on with life as a parent compared to her younger life with her parents? Because I think MJ definitely needs like a bit more backstory to her. Like, I think she's a fine character, but I want to know more about her. I want to know why she became a reporter. Like, why a reporter out of all things? Of course, they'll probably bring back MJ's stealth missions too. But I think it'd be cool if that, like, taser gun thing had an attachment wheel of sorts. We saw in Spider-Man 2 that she was able to attach a web shooter, and it can even be upgraded to have a sonic blast to deal with symbiotes. So let's build on that. You have 3 different attachments on top of the basic stun used to knock out enemies. The web shooter, which has limited ammo before reloading, can be used to lure enemies or web them up to be taken down. But these webs aren't as strong as to stick them, they decompose pretty easily. It's up to MJ to go over and take them down, subdue them, so you're not just like and it's like super easy. You can even fire a singular web line to pull down distractible objects at a range. Sonic Blast would come back as well. It's got 3 charges before needing to recharge, or you can manually recharge it. The blast can be used to disorient single enemies or a group of enemies, and can sometimes cause them to drop their weapons. But you still need to take them out, and the Sonic Blast makes a very loud sound, which can draw in more guards to your position, so it's all about strategy. Can you run and gun the whole thing, or would it be easier to distract some guards over there, but then take out someone who's all the way in the corner? It's all about strategy. The third attachment would actually be an improvement on the basic stun, where you can shoot a singular small-range electric shock that can be used to take out enemies at a distance, but it takes a really long time to recharge, like the Sonic Batarang in Arkham City long. You can also fire this at like generators or puddles of water people are standing on or nearby to take out multiple groups of enemies. And give us more use of the environment for takedowns. In more sections like in the zoo where she had to find clues to pretend to be this one Craven hunter, give us more stuff like that where we really use the investigative reporter of MJ as well. Even have like an escort mission with Cindy Moon where you have to lure enemies away from her so that Cindy doesn't get caught, and she can use distractions as well to help move them around to your little crazy game of chess. I really think they need to bring back Harry in this game. Graham Phillips and Yuri Lowenthal had such amazing on-screen chemistry. There's no reason not to dive more into that, especially since they haven't really had the chance to truly make up for Peter's words under the effect of the symbiote, and Harry lashing out at Peter not wanting to destroy the symbiote. These versions of Peter and Harry had such clear communication between each other, and until a point, they could easily reconcile with one another. So, Harry, the treatment that Peter made for Harry, it works, but Harry's still sick with this genetic disorder. It's genetic. That's why it affected his mother and him, and not Norman. It's a genetic disease. Let's just call it that. But Harry is still sick. But he's surviving. Barely. And he hates it. And through this, while Harry is cooped up in a lab, he can learn that the Devil's Breath outbreak and Devil's Breath itself was meant to be a cure for him. So he can learn, and we can see that Harry feels a bit responsible for the events of the previous games. Maybe even Norman wanted to harness Martin Lee's powers as a way to save him and his mom. Norman has been such a driving force in this game, all for Harry, and it's not talked about as much as it should be. This can actually lead Harry to want and try and save himself quicker just so his father can stop with all this. And this can actually be a way to bring in Harry's substance abuse from the comics. Like, he's trying any and all medication he can get his hands on. And he's rich, so he can get on any medication he wants. And after an intervention with Peter and MJ, Harry decides to ask Peter to help convince his dad to stop trying to save him and just let him die, to move on from his obsession, which causes Norman to test the latest and most unstable G-serum on himself, turning him into a more monstrous Green Goblin. I'm gonna put Norman and Otto in like a singular section. For Otto, his arc needs to fully move on from his hatred of Norman, and Norman needs to understand his obsession with trying to save Harry is not only destroying him, but it pretty much destroyed New York on multiple occasions. But Norman can't seem to understand that, which ultimately leads him into becoming the Green Goblin. For the design of Green Goblin, I really do want them just to make him a guy in a purple and green elf costume at first, and then over time, over the course of the game, the Goblin becomes more monstrous and powerful, a little more like the ultimate version of the character. But Norman is still of sound mind the entire time. He's in complete control of his actions. The villains from the last 3 games have always been the same. I'm not the first one to bring this up. So many people have mentioned this. They're always people who have a personal connection to Spider-Man, and the final boss, the player fights and it pulls on the heartstrings with the whole, "This isn't you, blank wouldn't have wanted this, we can still make this right," and all that other stuff. Having Norman and Otto both be antagonists has the opportunity to do something a little bit different. We can get more of their history and see more of Norman's dark side, and we learn he's always been a terrible person. But when he met his wife and they had Harry, he tried to be better. They were the only thing that truly made him more of a human being and gave him a new sense of responsibility to someone other than himself. But if they're both dead, what's the point? So he begins to regress to this manipulative scumbag that Otto once knew. And Otto can even try to be this devil on his shoulder to kind of push him to really be the ultimate manifestation of not being responsible with his great power that the Goblin is. I want to make this clear. They need to keep the green and purple elf color scheme. This can even lead to like a Goblin nation of sorts, which can have more opportunities for air combat. More on that later. And during the final fight, or during that intervention scene between Peter, Harry, and Norman earlier, I want them to call out Norman for being responsible for so many events in the previous games. Like, he worked with Fisk. He was the driving force for Martin Lee and Otto's revenge quest, which led to the bombing of City Hall, Miles losing his dad, the Devil's Breath outbreak, and Peter losing May. Then the power vacuum caused Roxxon and the Underground fiasco, which caused Miles to lose Finn. Then Harry with the symbiote invasion. All of that happened because of Norman. There needs to be a level of, responsibility for that, and I don't think Norman should be redeemed in this. I think they should do the whole he dies. Like, Norman dies, being the monster. Like, not every villain is going to get a redemption arc. And that's just life. So, yeah. Again, I don't have a full story for this. If you guys want a full story, let me know. I'll make a full story about this and have something a little more nuanced. But speaking of that Goblin Nation thing earlier, some people have pointed out that when Otto says, "the final chapter," the lighting made his glasses look like Spider-Man lenses. But I don't think they should, or they're gonna do Superior Spider-Man. The first reason is actually the reason why the black suit was in the first game. Brian Intar said we wanted to give that suit the story it deserves. I bring this up because both the Superior Spider-Man and the Superior Octopus suits are both in Marvel's Spider-Man 2. So using that same logic, since they have the suit in this game, they won't do that story for Spider-Man 3. Also, since we've already had a Peter not himself, Miles and MJ would immediately know that something's up. And I don't think they're gonna follow Spider-Man life story where it's Miles. That just... I don't see that working. So, in exchange for a new neural interface, Norman and Otto work together on not only saving Harry, finding ways to kill both the Spider-Men, but just so Otto can get his revenge. That is the only reason he is helping Norman. Revenge. That is it. He's not trying to save Harry. Or maybe he is to prove his, mental superiority. But Peter is actually able to create a new neural interface which kind of fixes what was going on with the mood swings in Otto's head. It doesn't fully fix him, but it slowly gives him his empathy back. Slowly. Otto realizes that I took it too far. I should not have done that. I cost you your aunt. She's dead because of me. Kind of like how Miles redeemed Mr. Negative in Spider-Man 2. I really want Peter to redeem Otto in this game. I know I just said that the Goblin shouldn't be redeemed, but Otto is a pre-existing villain. Again, I'll make the story later. These are just ideas. Now that we have character and some story ideas, let's talk about gameplay ideas. First, I really think we need to build on having two different Spider-Men, and actually take inspiration from Batman Arkham Knight's dual team mechanic. In certain parts of that game, you're able to seamlessly switch between the two in combat with the push of a button. I honestly thought we were going to have something like this in Spider-Man 2, but having a partner, whether that be the other Spider-Man, Agent Venom, or Wraith, a lot of the times it felt like an afterthought. Like, there were times where I was doing a random crime and the other person was there. I didn't notice they were there until it was over. So maybe having the opportunity to switch between them and takedowns, or just more opportunities where you really feels like you're playing as both of them. Like where you're swinging around as both Peter and Miles, you can switch in between. Just more opportunities like that, and even puzzles too. Maybe one Spider-Man uses their web to hold something in place while the other powers something or grabs something. This can also apply to the final boss as well, where you play as both Peter and Miles fighting the Green Goblin together. In Spider-Man 2, on all the promo, they made it look like you were gonna fight Venom with both of them, but that really wasn't a case at all. That was just one cutscene. It was a quick time event at most. It should at least start with both Spider-Men, then it switches to a Miles 1v1, and then it becomes a 1v1 between Peter Parker and Norman Osborn. They really did mention the Spider-Mobile more than once if you think about it. And even a side mission idea I have for that involves the Spider-Mobile. One of the projects that the Emily May Foundation are working on is a new, clean, alternative fuel source. So Peter uses it to power an AR racing challenge with the Spider-Mobile. Miles can do these too. These races would take place within the map without any cars or pedestrians, because I know the first thing people would do is try and run them over. I would do the same thing, like driving into someone with the Batmobile and having them hit with electric shock just adds more insult to injury. Some of these would be simple time trials, some of them even involve wall riding, and other objectives like repairing broken bridges or putting down fires with webs. And maybe the reward for these challenges could be kind of like a Spider-Man Transformer hybrid, you know? Like something where it's like a really bulky suit. I think that would be cool. Now, about the traversal, I want to talk about ideas for web swinging and the web wings. For the web swinging, what I'd like to see is a few new ways to get around the city, like being able to slingshot in midair between buildings, or double tapping the right trigger to fire 2 web lines and just kind of hang around in the air, or do it for a smaller and faster loop-de-loop. The ability to climb webs like an Ultimate Spider-Man in Web of Shadows. Lastly, when you're really close to the ground and you're still holding the trigger, you use your web to kind of just run across the ground or kind of slide. So many times I've been in the groove of swinging to suddenly get too close to the ground and have all of that momentum be gone. Like, it feels like that concept scene from Into the Spider-Verse where the Leap of Faith scene didn't end with Miles triumphant on a rooftop. He accidentally crashed in the side of a truck and it just ended right there, killing all of the hype and momentum that power had. So just letting us coast and run across the ground would help with that a lot. I know it's also a skill issue. I just turned off like assisted swinging because I was bored one day, but still. Now for the web wings, I want to add like a few tweaks to be able to make it turn corners a little bit faster, or maybe like use the forward or like altitude boosters with the wings. I mean, I don't have a lot to talk about. They were done really well. Maybe as a way to do like a cool 180 degree turn without the webs. Maybe there is a feature, I just haven't discovered it yet. The web wings are great. And lastly, let's go with wall crawling too while we're at it. I know there's not much that can be done, just make it easier to climb up walls, in a sense. There's been so many times I've been trying to just wall crawl, not wall run, just wall crawl, and I just get stuck. So just like straighten that out a little bit. Ooh, maybe like we're on a really tall building, we can like slingshot ourselves up and across the sides of buildings like in the first Amazing Spider-Man movie. Combat has so much potential on top of how much is done now. They're already testing the waters with air combat with their bird drones and wall combat with those hunters with the crossbows that stick to walls. So Insomniac could really dive straight into the deep end and give us, a little more Web of Shadows. Because it would make so much sense for a guy like Spider-Man to fight people on buildings. Also, if we are going to add more, combat abilities, since Peter doesn't have the symbiote anymore, he should really go back into his webs. Similar to how in the Neversoft Spider-Man games, you could have like web boxing gloves for extra damage, or a web dome that will explode when you're overwhelmed by enemies. Or even like a web wrecking ball where it takes all the nearby weapons and throwable objects, it just spins it around at all nearby enemies, and the more stuff you collect, the more damage it does. And this would be a good way to disarm all of your opponents at once, and it's all about like strategy, the placement of where you're standing so you get as many weapons as possible. And for Miles, I really want them to lean into the Venom electricity constructs he's been able to do in the comics. Recently, Miles' Venom powers have evolved to where he can like wrap up foes in Venom tendrils like his webs. He can even form a sword like the Green Lantern. Like, imagine being a common criminal in New York and Spider-Man shows up and just makes a sword made out of bioelectricity. That would be so cool. Lastly, I want to talk about the alternate suits. I don't have a list of new suits because I want to wait till the DLC comes out, but in this hypothetical third game that is considered the final chapter, They should bring back every suit from the previous games. The only problem with that is that Peter has way more suits than Miles. Even though recently he's been getting more and more suits, it's still going to be a while before they have enough to work with to catch up. They could take some original suits that Insomniac made for Peter, like the Velocity suit or the Associated Comics suit, but add a Miles spin to it. That's an idea. Color variants should also make a return. Speaking of which, random tangent, I know people wanted Peter's Spider-Verse suit, and so do I, but where was the big time suit? Like, I'm not the biggest fan of it, but you introduced the concept of the same suit in different colors, and like the thing the big time suit is most known for is having different colors, not just green. Okay, tangent over. Another way around having a lot of suits to choose from would be a suit builder. I said this in a previous video, but I'll say it again. TroyOboyo17 made a video a few years back. It's a really solid concept and that should be implemented. Be sure to watch that video after this one. I'll have it in the description. So both Peter and Miles would have one slot for the custom suit, and if you want to change some stuff, you have to reselect the suit all over again, switching between color variants to save some space. Maybe even it could be so in-depth, it can allow us to customize the color of our webbing, spider sense, venom attacks, spider arms, and the web wings too. And finally, we need 100% completion suits back. Completing the game to 100% in Spider-Man 2 didn't feel as rewarding, because the incentive wasn't as enticing as the first game. Besides the satisfaction of completing the game. We all wanted to know what that last suit was. Although I am 50-50 on the Undies suit. But I do have two ideas for the 100% suits for Marvel Spider-Man 3. Not only for completing the main story, but then again on ultimate difficulty without changing the difficulty setting ever. You change it once, you don't get the reward. Firstly, both suits you unlock for Peter and Miles. The first set of suits are based off each Spider-Man's first appearance. Peter's suit being the one from Amazing Fantasy 15 by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, and Miles' suit being from his classic suit's first appearance in the Ultimate Comics Volume 2, Issue 5 by Brian Michael Bendis and Sarah Pichelli. These suits will be colored and shaded to reflect each respective art style. You can even give them color variants as well to match and resemble other famous artists who drew for the characters, like Mark Bagley, John Romita Sr. and Jr., or Todd McFarlane, as long as they're properly credited. And now, for the ultimate 100% completion suit, should be the Cosmic suit for both Peter and Miles. In the comics, the Cosmic suit, or Captain Universe, draws from the power which is known as the Enigma Force, or Unipower, it depends who you ask, which basically makes them a god. Characters like the Hulk, Daredevil, and even Deadpool have used this power. These suits would have an optional suit power, God mode, where you don't take any damage at all and your abilities recharge twice as fast. For people who want to speed run the game or just feel all powerful, this can still be turned off, or this power can be applied to other alternate suits, so you're not stuck with just the Cosmic suit. And also, for the final boss, I really think it would be great if it wasn't like an anti-villain suit like the first two games, like two main games. Miles Morales didn't have that. You could wear whatever suit you wanted no matter how cool or silly it was. Or even if they are going to have like an alternate anti-villain suit, it should just be like a classic suit, like a reimagined classic suit for Peter. Just classic red and blue. That's it. Alright, that's about it. Thank you all so much for watching this video about improvements and ideas I have for Marvel Spider-Man 3. Do I expect any of these to happen? Absolutely not. Do I think it would be awesome if just one idea was implemented? Absolutely. Let me know if you like this video and want to see more videos like this. If you want my concept for what the story mode would be like, let me know in the comments as well. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more. Be sure to check out my social medias in the description, and I'll see you all later. Peace out.